Of course, I'm Pam Carter, also known as the bishop's wife. Before I was a bishop's wife, I was pastor's wife and a pastor and missions director. And most recently, the last church I was in, I worked with a church that had a 30-year ministry in Haiti. And for many, probably 25 of those years, the focus of their work was on a medical clinic. And they provided medical care to a village in Northern Haiti called Grise-en-Garde and worked through a Methodist church there, the church at Tovar. Ken and I became involved in the ministry at Providence Methodist in Charlotte and learned all about its history. And as we went on our own experience there, not being medical people, not being a nurse or a doctor, we began to think about ways that people who were not medical people could contribute to ministry in Haiti. And so we looked around our congregation to look at the gifts of the people present. And as Ken said this morning, one of the things that Charlotte is known for is being a banking center. There are lots of people with financial skills and financial gifts in that congregation. So we began to think about how we might look at ministry in an expanded way beyond the clinic and the volunteers that went to the clinic. So we began a study group. Come on in. We began a study group to study how we might use those skills in the financial sector in Charlotte, the members of our congregation in Haiti. And I'll let Mary Lou talk about the study group that happened and how they went to Haiti and interviewed women and all that kind of thing. So this grew out of a desire to match the strengths in our congregation with needs in the world. So that's how it began. But before we get started, I'm going to share with you a little PowerPoint that I created to introduce you to microcredit in general. How many of you know what microcredit lending is? Great. Okay. I'm going to assume you don't know a lot, but go pretty quickly for those of you that do know something. Okay, this man right here is called Muhammad Yunus. He is still living. Muhammad Yunus was born in Bangladesh, studied economics there, got a master's in economics, and then got a Fulbright scholarship to study in the U.S. and studied where? Vanderbilt, which has Methodist ties, of course. He focused his studies at Vanderbilt on economic development, and he went back to his home country to serve as the head of the economics department. Now, when he returned, there was something going on, a famine. How many of you remember seeing pictures? Come on in, Gary. Sorry. No, it's no problem. When he returned to Bangladesh, the famine was happening. And he said that he would come out of his department, go downstairs, leave his classroom, go downstairs, and on the steps of the university building, there would be somebody there on the steps dying. And sometimes they would be so weak from hunger, so emaciated, they would be so still that you couldn't tell if they were alive or dead. And he began to ask himself the question, what good are all of my economic theories if they don't help people live? What good is supply and demand, all the sort of things you talk about in a class in economics, if it doesn't affect the real life of people who want to live and thrive? So he began to research and become involved in finding out a solution to the problem for the poorest in his community. What he found is we know this to be true, the richest have access to capital to change their lives, to make investments in a business, to grow something, but the poor did not. And he's quoted as saying, if I could be useful to another human being, even for just a day, it would be a greater thing than all of the big thoughts I could have at the university, which is a very a different kind of person that thinks that way, but I find that a beautiful quote. Eunice and his students went out into the community, began interviewing the people in the most depressed areas of his community. He went to the poor to talk to them about their economic lives. And what he found was that many of them, it wasn't that they didn't want to work, they didn't want to provide for themselves. The problem was many of them were trapped in a cycle of lending with money lenders, high interest money lenders, and it trapped them in a cycle of poverty. Now, how many of you believe that that's true for some of the poor we know? It can be true for some of the poor we know. So he decided to see what would happen if he could give the poor small loans with no collateral at a very low interest rate by comparison to what was being offered that they got from the money lenders. And he started with 42 loans to the women in this area in Chittagong, and the total amount of all those loans was $27, the first cycle, okay? So things start small that become big, right? And he believed that if he could provide enough support to this small group of loan recipients that they could repay the loans, and they did. Every one of them repaid the loans. And this is how he did it. Brilliant idea. He started solidarity groups. In order to ensure that the people paid back, he formed the women into solidarity groups. And Mary Lou will talk later about why we focus on women, okay? The loans were given to a group, the members held one another accountable, and they helped each other in this solidarity group to repay the loans together. Okay. Eunice called his effort the Grameen Bank. How many of you have ever heard of the Grameen Bank? Grameen Bank actually has come to the U.S., and I know this because they came to Charlotte. And they're doing work there. Mary Lou knows a little bit about that. Over 8 million loan recipients, 97% are women. And I'll just say briefly, they focus on women because it is a proven scientific fact that women return the profits they make back into the family at a rate of like 90% as opposed to men 35%. Now, I'm sorry, men, you get such a bad rap. And I will be happy if y'all want to change those statistics anytime.
There are exceptions.
Yeah, this is true. This is true. Total loans to date of $11.35 billion worldwide through the Grameen Bank. Their rate of repayment now is at 96%. There are many financial lending institutions that will be thrilled to have 96% repayment rate. They've expanded their ministry in many ways to give home loans, home construction loans. They encourage savings. They've included death insurance. There are all kinds of things that Grameen Bank does to work to bring people out of poverty into a better standard of living. Okay, but I'll refer you to this website, grameen-info.org, to look at that. And they actually have some standards to determine when a person is no longer at a poverty level that are very interesting. And if we have time, Q&A later, I'll share that with you. The loans focus on women for the reason we said. The women find not just that they improve financially, but in the standing in their community. They're more respected. They're seen as leaders in their community as they begin to take on this greater economic activity and role in their community. Okay, now, what does this have to do with United Methodists? Now, Ken has so stolen my thunder, I thought I was going to lay on you something you didn't know. Thank you. Early Methodists were involved in microloans to the poor, and so I'm going to tell you the story. Okay, the strength of this early movement was John Wesley's ability to make his members feel accountable for their faith and accountable to one another. You know, I have to say, losing weight. It's one thing to say, I'm going to try and lose weight. It's another thing to go to Weight Watchers and have to get on the scales. Well, John Wesley recognized that and grouped people in what he called societies and class meetings. It was a brilliant move on his part, and it was meant to encourage the spiritual development of his members. These groups of people would meet weekly to talk about the progress they were making in their faith. It was an open and very honest discussion. I know that some Methodist clergy in Florida are in covenant relationship groups. Raise your hand if you might be a part of that. Yeah. It's very meaningful, and I've known people that have been in the same covenant relationship group for 30 years, and it can really make a difference. So it's a similar kind of principle. Here's a picture of, or drawing of what that might look like. Tights and all. Okay, conditions for membership: that you had a desire to flee from the wrath to come. And I don't know about you, but I don't use that language much. I desire to flee from the wrath to come. A way we might say it is to fall more in love with Jesus every day. Okay, but what Wesley believed about that was that if you fell in love with Jesus more every day, there would be some evidence in your life. It wouldn't just be that you were having this spiritual moment inside you all the time, but that other people could tell by the way you lived that you were falling in love with Jesus every day, right? So he had the members of his societies agree to specific rules. Now, there were lots of rules, and some of them we would just automatically assume. You'd pray, you'd read your scripture, you'd attend worship, you'd take communion, on and on. But it got more specific, and I've chosen some here that have to do with money, because we can talk about money. We've already learned that this morning. To be careful, to restrain yourself from evil, to pawn nothing, not even to save a life, to give alms to those who need it from what you possess. All those things were seen as evidence that you were living a godly life, and that you desired to become more holy. Remember that phrase, social holiness? It has specific implications, okay? So here are some of the questions they would answer when they get together. Have you sinned since we last met? What temptations have you met with? How were you delivered? I mean, it was pretty specific. Some of us probably wouldn't want to answer all this to one another, but anyway. Okay. John Wesley believed that we would grow both spiritually and both in our public social dimension in life. It isn't just a personal experience, has this social dimension. So he began his first headquarters in a building that had been abandoned, a foundry, after an explosion had been abandoned. He took it, and he began a ministry there that had very tangible ministries attached. How many of you have like a ministry center like that attached to your church, or your church participates in a community ministry center? Okay. That ministry center had a clothes closet, a school attached to it, and a clinic. So they believed, as Ken was talking about, that Jesus was a healer, a teacher, all the things we've been talking about. But here's something else they did. He saw the need for the poor who couldn't get loans to get loans. So he begged for some money to make loans, and he got a small amount of capital, and he made loans of 20 shillings each to 255 persons, and they were to pay it back over a 3-month period. So that was the early Methodist model, I like to call it, of microcredit lending. Now, what he didn't do is what Muhammad Yunus did, which was connect this whole accountability structure of class meetings or societies, or what Muhammad Yunus called solidarity groups, to the loan program. But sometimes I like to think maybe, just maybe, that connection could have been made at some point, but it's been made in our lifetime. And it calls to mind for me that this is part of our DNA as Methodists, is to care enough about the poor that we get involved in this way in making life and transformation possible.
My name is Mary Lou Cagle, and I have traveled here from Charlotte, and I'm just here to share the experience. And when I was listening to Pam talk about Muhammad Yunus, it still sounds kind of theoretical, but I will tell you that we've lived this. And every time she mentioned something about Muhammad Yunus, I'm like, this really happened to us. So I'm just here to tell you a story about what happened to us, this small group in Charlotte. I would say this, in 2009, we were sort of in the depth of the financial crisis. Bishop Carter was just plain old Ken. And Pam was someone I liked and admired, but she was the dear friend she is today. We were invited to lunch. And in the depth of this financial crisis, we were told, I don't know why there's so much financial talent in this town, and nobody in this church is doing microcredit lending in Haiti. And we're like, what are you talking about, Ken? First of all, we went home and freaked out. Then we read Muhammad Yunus' book, tried to learn as much about microcredit as we possibly could, but we were still petrified, I will tell you. We followed Pam Carter to Haiti, and we started meeting. We met with over 100 women, just listening to what they had to say, learning about their business, visiting the marketplaces. We started trying to build relationships with people we'd never seen before, and they'd never seen us. And in that process, our lives were changed. Now, she's explained microcredit, so I don't really have to go over it. But don't make too much of it. That's what I'm saying. And I love the John Wesley example, because microcredit is nothing more than a small loan. That's all. It could be any amount. We started with $200 because in our visit with the 100 women, they told us they thought they could handle that much money. We actually talked about a lot of different amounts, and they said some big amount would scare them. They believed they could handle $200, and that's why we start with $200. It's as simple as that. It's just what they told us. Life in Haiti is hard. Goods are expensive. You think if you go to a poor country that things will be cheap? They're not cheap. A lot of things are imported, and they cost a lot of money. It is also an island that I think is beautiful. It suffers from a lot of good arable land, so it's hard to grow enough to feed yourself. As you well know, they suffer from floods and earthquakes. It's very hard. People work really hard. This thing about unemployment number drives me crazy. People get up and work hard every day just to survive. They may not count in an unemployment figure. They're just trying to make it day to day. In Haiti, everything is bought and sold in a marketplace. In a Haitian market, which we visited many markets, you can buy 1 clove of garlic. You can buy a handful of rice, a handful of beans, and a few tablespoons of oil for your meal, which I liked the example of the woman who was making the small cake with the oil and the meal. I thought about our Haitian friends. You can buy enough just to cook 1 meal. It's a tiny economy, this marketplace. The women we talked to, that was their business. They sell things in the market. So if it's market day, they're there selling. They eke out a living, but here's their problem. They don't have any access to capital. I feel like I'm living the Muhammad Yunus experience, and the man did not earn a Nobel Prize for nothing. He deserved it. So they're eking out this living. They're buying whatever they're selling in the market on credit from the wholesaler, and they're getting charged a horrendous rate of interest, and they have a very short time period to pay that back. That's what they told us. Our loans give them access to credit for the first time in their lives. Now, you're talking about people who don't own anything. You can forget about owning a car. They take a tap-tap wherever they go, or they walk. They don't own the house they live in. They may not be able to read or write, but I'm telling you, some of them are brilliant business people. So it's not like they start with any assets. They don't have assets. So they have absolutely no reason to give them credit except they have a business. As we do, which Muhammad Yunus had the brilliant idea, they form solidarity groups. But here's the key. They get to pick who's in their group. Now think how brilliant that is. If you were told that you had to form a group and each of you were going to be given $100 that you paid it back, would you pick some slacker to be in your group? No, you would pick somebody that you knew was going to pay that loan back. And that's exactly what they do. They get to choose who's in their group, and they elect a president. The president is responsible for collecting the loan payments. And that means these responsible women are in a group, and it is their solemn duty to repay these loans. And we're really clear in the beginning when we have our first conversation with them. You know, Haiti's been given a lot. But we're clear from the very beginning, this is not a gift. You must pay it back. It is your solemn obligation to pay this loan back. It's a different way to work. I want to talk a little bit about microcredit being a partner to charity. You and I know in all of our lives that the foundation of our giving is charitable giving. That's what we've grown up with. Children need school uniforms and books. People need emergency food and critical care. Schools need supplies. Sick people need care and medicine. Homeless people need shelter, care, and food. Microcredit lending is a partner to charity. It's not either or. You know, sometimes people will try to push you into a conversation and say either you do charity or you do microcredit. No, there's a need for both. So it's a partner. Microcredit lending in Haiti is only for women who already have a business. And I have the horrendous guilt about lending only to women. And so it's gotten me so bad that last time in January when we went to the Haitian Methodist Church and I saw these wonderful Haitian men in church, I asked a friend who was with us, I said, if I find men, a group of men who want a loan, will you get your buddies together and fund that loan? That was Bill Musgrave. I asked him. He said, yes, he would do that. So I don't want you to think our model is to lend to women for the 90% return because we're really talking about the family. But we are going to make a loan to men as soon as we have the opportunity, but it's going to be funded through the guys at the church. I want you to look at this worldwide repayment rate again. Any of you who've ever worked at a bank, look at the repayment rate of people who have no access to credit. After Muhammad Yunus wrote the book Banker to the Poor, and after he got his Nobel Prize, there was another book written called The Poor Always Pay Back. And the fundamental answer is why? It's because they don't have any other choice. This is their only access to capital, and the only one they will probably ever have. So we did this study. We scared ourselves to death, but asked our family and friends. We cobbled together $1,400, and we made 7 loans. So in a way, we started out without knowing it, sort of like Muhammad Yunus. We just took the plunge and decided to make 7 loans. And we came back and decided that our mission was to lend and be in economic development in the Cap Haitian region of Haiti. And I will tell you this, I hope I live long enough to see this making an economic difference in this region. In Haiti, I believe you have to have a laser focus on something, or you'll find yourself not believing that you're accomplishing anything. Our laser focus is in the Cap Haitian region, and it's people-to-people lending. Now, where is Cap Haitian anyway, in case you haven't been there? It's up in the northern region of Haiti. Most people are more familiar with Port-au-Prince, which is down in the south. Cap Haitian is up in the very north, and it's really near the Dominican Republic. And I will tell you just one little story about 2 women in Grisongard, and Grisongard's in that little box way up. In fact, you can walk to the Dominican almost from where we are. 2 women had decided, that were in our loan groups, had decided to move to the Dominican Republic for better opportunities. They could have just walked across the border and left. They paid off their loans before they left. Think of the integrity of those women. These are our rural communities. Another very important strategic decision we made was to lend in the rural areas. So right now we're on DonDon, Grisongard, Bayonne, Camp Louise, and just getting into Temesse. we learned a lot of great things about rural communities in Haiti. One of these things is they're very well organized. They formed themselves into groups called comités, and they have the head of the comité as like a mayor. Haiti has such poor support from the central government that people are forced to do things for themselves. So these local communities are really very strong. They have good leadership. They do things for themselves. And we were really impressed by the leadership we found. So we feel that was a strength to move into the rural communities. The other thing I would say, and if you're thinking about going to a different country, this is just what I'm asking you to look at. The cities have Fonds Communautaires. Fonds Communautaires is a Haitian bank run by a former investment banker named Ann Hastings. It's a very good bank, and we have all of our accounts in Fonds Communautaires. So we thought, why should we compete with a very good microcredit bank when we can go out in the rural communities and they can't even get to a bank? So that was a strategic decision we made. As we went along, we sort of felt our way. But I will tell you, making the decision to go into the rural communities had a few unexpected consequences. That is the road to DonDon. The first time I went up that road in the oldest Isuzu that has ever existed. Do you remember the old Isuzu rodeos or whatever they were called? And this one was red. There's the guy, you see that picture? Every puddle we went into, I did not think we were going to come out. I thought I would have a nervous breakdown. I mean, really, that's the closest I've ever come to a complete mental collapse because I didn't know where we were going. It was just one thing, and we were on this for 2.5 hours. And we just started figuring out that our driver would look at each puddle, and he would kind of figure out how to take each one of them. And by the time we got to DonDon, we realized that our driver was a genius, that he got us there in one place. We were 2 hours late because one of the members of our team was sick. We pulled into DonDon, and there were 100 women singing for us. And they didn't even know who we were. And they shared coffee, fruit, as poor as they were. When I saw the picture with the pennies, whatever they had, they gave us. They didn't even know if they were going to get a loan. So I was sitting there, and when we finally got to DonDon, I said, I don't think I have the strength to get out of the car. Now we have about 80 loans in DonDon, and the women are struggling. DonDon is tough because I will tell you a story about a couple of people that moved there. So this was actually the second place we made a loan was in DonDon. But here's what we did. We designed a program that would sustain itself. What we decided to do, if we were going to ask people to give us money, we wanted to say, if you'll just give us $200, that loan will live forever. So what we do is we charge an interest rate such that we can pay the administrative costs of the program, and what's left over, which is most of the money, we recycle that into bigger loans. That's the way our program works. You get a $200 loan. If you pay that loan back, you get a $225 loan. And if you pay that back, you get a $250 loan. So the enticement is every time you pay a loan back, you get a bigger loan. I was just there in January, and we just made our 278th loan, and we've raised over $48,000. And when I say we've raised, I'm not talking about myself. I'm talking about people who hear about it, people who just hear the story have contributed that money. So I take no credit for it. It's just been people who have listened to us. And we have a repayment rate just like Muhammad Yunus. It's almost like living this story of over 98%. And that 98% includes 2 women who died. One woman died in the earthquake when she was shopping for her business, and another woman has just died in Bayonne, and we don't know what happened to her. But that just goes to show you how faithful they are to repay these loans. And I do believe this. In a market that is so meager, where you can buy a clove of garlic, I have to believe in the power of capital. That $48,000 at work in this economy has got to make a positive difference. Now, why do I think that this has been successful? One key reason is some of the strategic decisions we made, like going to the rural communities, but another one is the relationships we have in Haiti. Pam told you that we've been there, our church has been there for 30 years. So people know us, and they know we're going to come back, and they know we're going to be there. Dr. Macklin Eugene happens to be the doctor in our medical clinic, and I think he deserves a Nobel Prize for his devotion to the Haitian people. He started an organization called New Hope for Haiti. It would be the U.S. equivalent of a 501c3. It has Dr. Eugene's in it, they have a banker, they have a school principal, they have a agricultural technician. So it's a group of Haitian professionals that are completely dedicated to the Haitian people, and they are our partners in Haiti. They do all the on-the-ground work. They choose the communities. Then we go talk to the women. Then they pick the ones who are going to get the loans. They do all the loan processing. They make them sign a contract. In fact, they have to sign twice. They sign a contract that says they're going to pay the loan back. And the second thing they have to sign, which I thought this was interesting when I was there in January, they hand them their $200 equivalent in goods. They have to count it in front of New Hope for Haiti, and then they sign another document acknowledging the amount of money they got. So it's a tightly controlled process. While it is a mission, and it is a mission that we're passionate about, it is also a business, and we run it as if it were a business. I have some things in my appendix that I will show you, all of our spreadsheets, our control documents. So underneath this mission is a business. These ladies you see are from Camp Louise. They're one of our new communities. They have pride, they're strong, they're smart, they're great business people. Camp Louise just repaid their first loan 100%, and they're working on their second loan. So if you just look at them, they are not weak people. They are strong people, and they work hard every day. And from what Pam said, I think it's interesting that we go back after we talk to the people who get our loans, and we ask them questions. And the feedback we get matches what Pam said. Here's one of my fears. One of my fears was, I always worry about everything, so I'm just a classic worrywart. So I thought, well, if we're making loans to these women, their husbands are probably going to get mad at them, and, who knows what kind of dynamic we could be setting up in these families. And it was something I really worried about. And I asked them that question. I said, is anybody in your family jealous of you because you have a loan? And they just laughed at me. And they said, our families are proud of us. First of all, we're eating better. I'm able to pay school tuition. My husband is proud of me because I'm busy, and I have this loan I have to pay back. That means I have to go out and I have to find clients. I have to buy in a better place. And it was nothing but positive. So that fear of mine went away. And because these Haitian communities are smaller communities where people know each other, they also tell us that they have more respect in the community because they're known now as someone who has a loan, and they love the activity. It was funny because one of the times when we were talking with them, I said, well, what do you do when you get your loan? I mean, what's the first thing you do? They held up their hands and they said, the first thing we do is we take a tap-tap to Cap Haitian and we negotiate. So you can see that the dynamic has been reversed, completely reversed. Instead of begging to buy from a wholesaler who's charging them something exorbitant, they're now taking cash and say, oh, sorry about your bag of rice. I'm going to go to somebody else and buy it. So with that negotiating power, now they can earn more margin and do better in their business. And what I'm hoping, another thing that I'm hoping to live long enough, is to see that they build their businesses up to hire more people, because in Haiti it's all about jobs. We had some women in DonDon who came to us and said, forget everybody else. We work harder than everybody else, and we want more. And they had been perfectly paid. So we took this one group of women and we put them together, and we called them the DonDon Super Performers. And we actually carved them out into another group and increased their net. Instead of giving them $25 more, we gathered some money up in the church and we increased their loan amount by 50. So they got 75 more instead of 25 more. And so now we've labeled them the DonDon Super Performers, and they're still super performers. And you know, in any large group, that will probably happen. So I'm just going to add to what Pam said by, this is research that was done by the School of Business. I can't remember which one. I think it was Michigan. This is what they say. In families where women have an income, they have a voice in decisions, resulting in better nutrition, health, and education. And we're all about it, the whole entire family. A woman will spend 90% of her income on her family. Men typically spend 35%, and this is in poverty-stricken countries. When women have skills to participate in public life, corruption declines. When only 10% of girls go to secondary school, the economy grows by 3%. I have a funny story, a quick one, about corruption in public life. My sister and I were lucky enough to get to go to Peru this summer. We had a great vacation, and we were in Cusco. And because we had just come back from Machu Picchu, and we were driving around in Cusco, and we noticed that all of the traffic cops were women. Every one of them, you know, doing all this stuff, and they're standing on these little things out in the middle of the intersection. We said, why are all these traffic cops women? And they said, because we found out that women won't take bribes. And they said they have a completely different traffic force now, is because nobody can bribe these women. He said, first of all, the taxi drivers insulted them. He said, now they're scared of them. He said, so I'm just telling you, I have personally witnessed bullet number 3. These are 2 of our ladies from DonDon. I'm just going to briefly tell you why I think Haiti continues to suffer economically. Aside from the earthquake, which killed 250,000 people and traumatized millions, you had people who could finally scrape up enough money to get out of Port-au-Prince, so they went back to where they came from. Unfortunately, when they arrived, they had nothing, which puts tremendous pressure on a city that's struggling anyway. Christine on the left, her sister died in the earthquake, but her family was spared. She was selling goods, just like the women we know, and she had saved goods, and she was trying to scrape together some goods. Her house collapsed, but she got these goods together and took them to this market and was trying to sell them to get enough money to get back to DonDon. Would you believe that market burned down? So the little bit she had, she lost. Somehow they got back to DonDon with nothing. Ronice, look at the beauty in her face. She sells makeup. And she lived on the street for 3 months with her 3-month-old child. Finally, all of these families thought they were dead. All of them were from DonDon. She made it back to DonDon, and when we had a church in Charlotte that gave us $4,000, gave Microcredit. They said, okay, you can have $4,000, but you have to spend it on earthquake victims. We're like, well, we're up here in Cap Haitian. So we went to DonDon and asked the women, does anybody from Port-au-Prince show up? And hands went up all over the place. And what had happened is people that finally made their way back home arrived with nothing. So we used that $4,000 to make 20 loans, and we shouldn't call them this anymore, but we call them our earthquake women. And so they had to reestablish their businesses in DonDon. And so far, every one of them has paid their loan back as well. So here I am, a Miss Numbers person, Miss Cynical, and Pam is telling you we've been in Haiti for 30 years. I just ignored it. I said, hopeless case, I'm not going to get involved in it. I was the most wrong person in the world. And I know I can make a difference. And I just never believed it. But it's true. And I will show you the boring stuff if you're ready. What I have is spreadsheets showing how the loan works. I have control documents. I have audit documents. I have cash flow documents. I have the infrastructure that makes it work. But it's the people that donate the money to us that is able to make the whole program work. So anybody have any questions?
The church's involvement for 30 years, were you involved in other ways in Haiti and then you did the microcredit?
No, that's what I was the one who avoided it. I didn't, because if there was a medical mission. Now, I helped Pam some with the school. Oh, he said.
Let me say it better. Because
Okay.
I meant, as the church was just always involved in missions in Haiti, medical or whatever, and only recently has the church done the microcredit?
Right, that's a good question. He asked how is it only recently that the church has done microcredit. The church itself started with a medical mission, and that's the 30-year continuous mission. About 10 years ago, Pam? About 10 years ago, Pam found an abandoned school and restarted that, so we expanded it into education. Microcredit has only been there since 2009. So yes, we're the most recent part of the mission, and that's why we call it now the three-legged stool: medical, education, and economic development. That is correct. 2009.
My church is involved with a medical mission in Jeremy, which is.
Oh, right. I know Jeremy.
Some of the docs that we sit down there have been a little bit discouraged because, for lack of a better way to describe it, almost a caste system that socially exists there with those who have some and those who don't have any. Has that been a problem that you've seen?
Well, he asked the question if we had recognized or been involved in some people perceiving this caste system. What I would say is, in microcredit, certainly not, because we're working what I would call at the bottom of the market. So I would imagine the people we're working with would be at the bottom level anyway. So we have not encountered that, because one of our successes, we believe, is person to person. We, New Hope for Haiti, are making these direct loans to women. I haven't seen that. It's probably where we're working.
I think you did mention something about the local Methodist Church helped fund one of the groups, but I was wondering where your capital comes from. Does it only come from your church, or do other people? I mean, how do you control how much money that you need to start a microcredit process? Does it come from your church, or do you just get donors from wherever? How does that?
That's a great question. There is nobody that hates to ask for money more than me, and that's another reason. I know you want to know where the money comes from. I'm just saying I am the world's worst fundraiser, but that's a perfectly good question. Where does the money come from? The first loans, the 7 loans, we just badgered our friends and our family, but we knew we had to move beyond that at some point. We got a seed money loan from the Providence United Methodist Church Endowment, and they said, we will give you $5,000 if you will raise $5,000. And so that's what we did. We do not fundraise, though. We don't have an official fundraising inside of Providence, but we've asked friends, family, people from outside the church. We get money wherever anybody will give us money. But what the church does, it acts as a vehicle. They write a check to the church, and I'll flip back to that one. Okay, so my sister gives money. Our other microcredit, they know of people with a small foundation. We raise money wherever we can get it. I did this talk up in Boone, North Carolina, and a little church called Maybell United Methodist Church. They went out to Boone and opened in an antique mall. They opened this place where people just brought their furniture to sell. She's raised over $1,000 from microcredit. So people hear the story, and then they go think of some way to raise money. So we've gotten a couple of matching grants, but most of it has just been small dollar amounts that people have given us when we heard the story.
How much
We charge 2% a month, so over 10 months it's 20% interest. The market rate in Haiti is about 24% interest. It's an expensive, that is cheap money compared to what they're going to get from a wholesaler. But that 20% means we pay our administrator a percentage of every loan collection they make, and that's how we pay the administrative fees for that. And at the end of that loan, let's say somebody gets a $200 loan. At 20%, they're going to pay back $240, right? We pay about 15 of that for administrative fees, and then the rest of the money allows that person to have a $225 loan. That's why the loan can be self-sustaining.
Is the administrative task, all that done in Haiti?
Yes, 100% done in
People are
Haiti.
being employed through that process?
The New Hope for Haiti does that. That's that relationship we have with New Hope for Haiti. The administrative work is all done by our partner in Haiti. So I guess the second strategic decision, if you're thinking about doing this in another country, is find a great partner and create a relationship with that partner. It all starts with a relationship. They have to trust you, and you have to trust them because they're handling our capital. Yes, ma'am.
I served with USAID in Bangladesh.
Mm-hmm.
I personally know Mohammed Yunus quite
Do
well.
you?
And I've taken some of the training,
Mm-hmm.
and I've visited some of their solidarity groups out in the country.
Right.
So it makes me ask you a lot of questions. One was the interest rate, and the other was well, I have two other questions. One is, does your New Hope group also provide sort of psychological or support for the solidarity groups, or do they just collect the loans? Because certainly the Grameen Bank does a lot of motivational things with the groups, and because most of the women in Bangladesh are illiterate, they have all these very elaborate ways that they memorize the 20 steps, and you probably read about that. But I guess the important question I would ask is, would you consider ever starting one of these in this country?
Well, you asked me two big questions. The first question is, when a new group is getting loans, we pay $250 extra. That's upfront fees. And that pays for the documents, the contracts I told you about, and that also pays for training. So what they do is, we're not as elaborate as Grameen. We have one full day of training. Remember, our requirement is we're not business startup. We require that they have an existing business. And so our assumption there is, if they have been able to survive and eke out a living with an existing business, then they have the business savvy to grow. So we probably don't provide as much as you're talking about, but we do provide one full day of training, and that's part of that $250 up front. The second question you asked was, would we consider starting that in the United States? Is that what?
Like in the poor areas of Charlotte?
Well, interestingly enough, did you know that a Grameen Bank just opened in Charlotte? Grameen, the real Grameen America. Providence actually contributed money for capital, because Grameen requires a pretty big capital upfront money. But there is a branch of Grameen America that just opened in Charlotte. So it is coming to Charlotte. You think, oh, our town, well, we don't need that money. It's a financial center. The fact is, there are thousands of people in poverty in Charlotte. And so Grameen is already up and running in Charlotte.
Is that the only one in the States, do you know?
There's one in Omaha, Nebraska. She asked about the Grameen branches. The first Grameen branch was in the Bronx in New York City, and then they opened one in Queens, I believe, and then Omaha. Now, let's see, why would Grameen be in Omaha, Nebraska? And so there's one in Omaha, there's one in California now, and now one in Charlotte. Those are the ones I know about.
And Providence has raised $48,000, is that right, for their program? But they gave a $10,000 gift to Grameen America in Charlotte, so, through endowment funds that the church has access to. So they're both local and global.
Yeah, I have a question in your view, and maybe this was a template that you just lifted from me. Maybe you could tell us a little bit about how you arrived at the structure of your program and how extensible you see that being to someone else maybe using this as a template in another area. So, I mean, it looks like you have a bunch of components you can walk us through in your appendix, but are there a lot of real specific considerations for, you know, another local community that you found that, you know, you've really got to look at the cultural dynamics or whatever before this is going to work somewhere else? Or walk us through some of that.
Well, I would think that the Grameen model was just a wonderful model for us to follow. And if you listen to Pam and then listen to me, we really followed that model. So if you're thinking about going to a different country, I think you all are in Guatemala, is that right, or somewhere? To me, it's who is the person on the ground in that country that you can absolutely trust to handle all of the money and the collections. And for us, that is New Hope for Haiti. We wouldn't have a program if it weren't for New Hope for Haiti. We can figure out how to get the capital raised, but having somebody in country, because you're not going to be able to do that in another country. It's having that strategic partner. It's also making decisions about where you're going to lend. And I have a funny story about my husband. He's the most wonderful person in the world and generous. We were on a trip, and Greg said, I just want to give everybody $1. And I said, Greg, we could go home and sell everything we have and give everybody in this country $1. We would be broke, and they wouldn't be any better off. I mean, that was the best analogy I could think of at the time, because he was just heartbroken. So what I will say is, in any country that you go to, whether it's Guatemala or Haiti or Africa, wherever, the demand will always be there. There will always be this many people wanting what you're able to provide, and you're going to be able to provide that much of it. So stay laser focused on what you can do, and don't lose your focus. That's why we're staying in the Cap-Haitian area. That's why we're staying in the rural communities in the Cap-Haitian area. If you keep that focus, I believe that's another critical part. It was a strategic decision on our part to stay out of the places where Foncosé was, to go to the rural areas. But that would be something you'd have to, if you're going to think about going into another country, that's another decision you could make. So I think that's extremely important.
Sorry. That they built in a lot of accountability.
Yeah, we'll talk about that.
The way
now.
the funds are, deposits are put in a deposit-only account, so the people working with the program cannot draw off the capital, and it builds up there until another loan cycle is made. There's auditing on this end, so there's all kinds of safeguards and partnership in making sure that things are, every penny's accounted for.
I would say
That's banking people. That ain't people like me.
Our heart is in the mission. Sorry. Our heart is in the mission. The infrastructure's in business. That's what I would say. Is if we didn't have a heart for it, we couldn't do it. This is just what I told you about the upfront cost. This is a spreadsheet showing a $200 loan, which earns 20% interest, and how you end up. I'll just give you this presentation. I've got a flash drive right here. I can just hand it to you. That shows how the $24 payments. And interestingly enough, as much as I love Foncosé as a bank, do you know what the women told us was one of their favorite things? Now, this is just from talking to them. They said, your payment is the same every month. Foncosé has this really complicated declining balance, you know, where you owe $48.32 one month and $47.63 and all this stuff. They're like, just tell us what our payment is. So it's just interesting that they appreciated that. So this just is a spreadsheet showing you how the money's collected. This is our goal. We put together a control plan, and it's a real control plan written by an auditor. I don't have to go over the details, but this is our goal. This is our summary of controls. As Pam said, we have a separate account at Foncosé for every single loan group. So DonDon 1, Earthquake, DonDon Super Performers, every one of those loan groups have a separate and auditable account. We wire the money into Foncosay in dollars. That I'm a signature on that account. And then the people at New Hope for Haiti take the money in dollars and put it in goods, Haitian goods. So we have an audit trail going from the dollar account to the good account. And then when they collect the payments, as Pam said, we have set up another account called repayment. And so all the repayments have to go in this account, which is deposit only. So they can only put money in the repayment account, and they can't reallocate it back out into making more loans until we authorize it. So that's how kind of we are keeping control of the cash.
Is the entity a separate corporation from the church?
She asked, you mean New Hope for Haiti?
No, not New
Us?
Hope. You know, the microcredit, is it a separate organization from the church?
No. We're just, she asked me if the Microcredit was a separate organization. No, we're just a little team of church members. We don't really have any official status. We're not. We're just.
The church owns the
It's a
accounts,
mission.
but the church owns the accounts.
The church owns the accounts. When people give us money, we deposit it into church accounts. They're all church accounts, but they're designated accounts. And when money is wired for Microcredit, Providence wires the money, ultimately ends up in Foncosay. So the church is taking that big burden off of us administratively. They're doing administrative work for us that is really helpful to us.
You mentioned the payments are monthly. So if you lend them $200, then they pay you $24 a month. Is that what the idea is?
For 10 months.
$24, and it's over 10 months.
Right.
And then they start again.
Then they start again. So we loan them $200. The loan a period is 10 months. They pay us back $24 a month for 10 months. That's $240, which is 20% interest. Of that, approximately 15 goes out for administration. That leaves 25, which goes right back to them as a bigger loan. That's why we tell the people that donate money to us that once you fund a loan for $200, you can change a family's life. And as long as they repay the loans, that money will live forever. That is what we tell them. Yes, ma'am.
Have you gotten beyond the market ladies to, cell phone managers or any other kinds of business?
She's asking me if we have gotten in any other businesses. No, we have not. We're still lending to market ladies. That's the primary economic activity in Haiti.
Just a point of interest, and you have had a very low rate of default. Let's say somebody doesn't want to pay back or does not pay back. What do you all hope to do? Or do you have a plan?
We've actually had the experience. This is where having a partner, a true partner, is where you live and die with this partner. We had a group in DonDon that sort of was very slow paying. And so I cannot tell you how much tenacity New Hope for Haiti has for making these loan collections. And so our auditor back in Charlotte, before I went in January, she says, rah, 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 rah. And the women were complaining to us and say, you're not turning these loans around fast enough. And so our instructions to the women was, if the solidarity group doesn't repay, nobody gets another loan. What we're finding out from New Hope for Haiti is that everybody doesn't pay, they don't get another loan. You see what I mean? Like 50 people or 40. So I had a big talk with Dr. Eugene. I said, Dr. Eugene, that is not what we told the women. And he said, well, I'm sorry, but if one person doesn't pay, then they'll all start paying less. And so as a respected partner, we had to listen to that, and even though the people in Charlotte are complaining because the money's piling up in the repayment account, you have to respect them. They said we would never get any money because then if one person was real slow next time, then two people would be really slow. So their tenacity is such that everybody must repay. And so we had this one group. Well, they kicked out these two groups, but I swear they collected almost 90% of what they were going after. We didn't even have a write-off because of the interest that these women had paid. So they are just tenacious loan collectors, and that's what you need. Yes?
Two quick questions. Do you share the financial side of it? Will you share the spreadsheets or anything?
Right, absolutely. She asked if we would share it. We'll give you everything we have. Yes, we will.
And I believe that this PowerPoint will be part of what Matt is taping, so you can look at these very specific items in greater detail.
We'll give you everything we have.
We have that thumb drive, we will make copies available.
Sure, sure. I'll just give it to you.
And then just the second question was just, when you all gave $10,000 to Providence America to come into Charlotte, was it I assume a much larger amount was collected or needed for that thing?
Oh.
Was it a huge amount of capital?
Her question was that $10,000 at Providence part of the capital? If I remember correctly, and I may not, because at the same time I heard the first thing about Grameen, we were just starting microcredit. So I had to decide, am I going to spend my time on Grameen or am I going to spend my time on microcredit? So I decided to go with microcredit. So I only got in on the tail end of the fundraising for Grameen, which Providence, for Grameen America. So Providence helped take them over the top. But either the required upfront capital is either $2.5 or $3 million. They require that funding up front because if you think about it, you're starting a lending institution. Think of the string you have in loans before you start getting that repayment. I mean, they need that upfront capital, and that is contributed capital. That is not equity or anything. That's what Grameen requires. So it took a while to get that money raised in Charlotte. So there's our agreement with New Hope for Haiti, and I have all these control documents. We'll share it with anybody that wants.
How will you share it?
I have this thumb drive. I have this thumb drive here, which
Yeah,
you.
what I'm going to do, if I may
Okay.
suggest, the foundation will have that available. Send us your email, and we'll distribute that as electronic copy.
Can we put it on our website?
Yep.
And we have actually, we have a link on Google that I have my Mac with me. I think it has that link on it. I may be able to send you that link.
I'm going to leave this at the front, and if you want to give me your email address, we'll give you that link, okay? Right here.
Yes?
Is there, I mean, are you guys open to, as we kind of move down our own path with this, answering questions or connecting with you?
We're so amazed. We're humbly amazed that this worked. I'm telling you, humbly amazed, with Haiti being one of the poorest countries you've ever walked into. So we will meet with you. We'll share anything we have. We'll do whatever it takes. We met with a group from Wofford College, and that Wofford is in Spartanburg, South Carolina. We went to Haiti with them, and we're the ones that introduced Wofford to Tremez. And Wofford is now making microcredit loans in Tremez. So we're committed to helping other people start this if you want.
Did you have to do much to bring New Hope up to the level that you needed for them to provide support, or did they already have that capability?
That's a good question. She asked me if we had to bring New Hope for Haiti up to our standards. I would say we did. That wasn't because we didn't trust them. That was because while in their heart they wanted to do microcredit, I don't believe they had the business controls, audit, foundation that we had kind of grown up with. But they appreciate it and they understand it and they follow it to the letter. So the answer is yes. If you find a partner you trust, you may have to do a lot of educating with them and showing them your agreements, showing them the controls you expect, showing them the accounts you expect them to adhere to. So there is an education factor on their sides, but they're such wonderful people, they're doing it.
I hope this isn't a down question because it's a thrilling thing that you're doing. I'm sure you've struggled with the interest rate. If Grameen America charges 20% in Charlotte, it'll be usurious probably. And so what
You know, people are always shocked with that because you would freak out if somebody charged you in our environment at a 20% interest rate. But what I will tell you, in that country, in that environment, with that kind of risks, when you have a loan collector, Meme, who's the agricultural technician, is our loan collector, and you saw the road to DonDon, he has to make multiple trips to DonDon to collect. Multiple. So it's an expensive model. So at this point, I think we're actually under market for Haiti. Now in America, it's different.
Except that they can't get credit.
Right, I understand. Yeah.
Well,
But
I
I-
share this
But I wouldn't charge them.
Collectors over here in West Orlando who charge high interest rates because they know that people can't get credit.
I wouldn't charge them. I wouldn't charge them as we tried to charge. Here's what we tried to do. We tried to charge the lowest amount that we could charge, still pay our goal was to charge the least we could charge, pay the administrative fee, and have enough left over to make a bigger loan. That's all we tried to do, was put a little sandwich on that. And that's how we came up with the 20%. Then we checked it against Foncose and the other microcredit lenders, and we're slightly under them.
And according to, I have some information here about Grameen and their rates. Let me read this to you. Government-run microcredit programs in Bangladesh or through Grameen are 11% at flat rate, but that amounts to 22% at declining basis. If you look at microcredit lending around the world, it will seem high to us. But I can tell you that we're cheaper than other microcredit lending in Haiti. So they did their homework to look at what was out there. The commercial lending rate in Haiti, when I looked at it some time ago, I'm assuming it's still about the same, was 46%. So you see, it's kind of, you have to look at it in the context.
The other thing I would say is, remember, not one penny comes back from us. This is not a profitable institution. We get contributions for the capital, and then we use that interest to pay for all the expenses and make bigger loans. So there's no profit in it for us. Yes, sir?
I'm Pastor Preval. I am a native of Haiti, and I am a United Methodist minister. I want to congratulate you for what you are doing in my country. Especially, I saw that you are working in my home, not only in my home country, but where I was born.
True.
And
Tremés.
and Toba, and a lot of my family, and receive and from you. And I'm glad that somebody asked a question about the class, this, in Haiti. Yes, it is. But people who do not have a vision as a mission, their purpose is just to make money. And they charge high interest and with brutality, and that instead of helping the people, they create more problems. They make the people, poor and poor. But one question I have for you, and you said that you only help give loan to people those who are already in business. Since you know already, I don't know, I cannot tell you because you've been there. You experience the poverty stricken, the starvation of the people, and the condition of the world, the infrastructure. But I believe that, and I know there are some young adult women and some other adults who want to start a business, but they don't have the means. And that's why many never start a business. if somebody like that among those who never, they want to, so to put food on the table and then to come out of poverty and starvation of food. If those people, do you plan to consider to help make loan to those who do not have a business, but you consider to teach those people, the newcomers, and even though they don't have a business yet, but they so desire to start something, but they don't have money.
Reverend Floreal, I knew I recognized your name because one of the people running the Tremesse School is also named Floreal. It just tells you what a small world it is. And Tremesse is doing a wonderful job in that community. And Floreal is one of the people helping run that school. What I would say to that, as I know that is a demand, for every woman we make a loan to, there are 100 women who don't get a loan. So it's not like we're even meeting that demand. And what I would say, if you want to help people start businesses, that is perfectly acceptable. That is like a venture capital operation. And one of the hardest things to do, especially when you feel like you've achieved a little modest amount of success, is to lose your focus. And we're just trying really hard to stay focused. It's not that I don't recognize that issue. I do. And I know there are a lot of young people who want to start businesses, but that's just not the business we're in. And so I wish we could meet every need, but we can't.
Can I just say that we've gone over time?